to worship. Lynn? Now you may go back. Thanks for sharing with me. Back in the olden days, and you can roll your eyes, when I was a child, I ate my meals with my grandparents, on whose farm my family and I lived. My grandmother Beckert was a good cook. Plain and simple, produce from the garden, meat from the barnyard. It was all tasty. Well, almost always. There was an inevitable meal we had shortly after butchering time. Liver and onions. I knew before I got to the table that day what we were having by the fragrances drifting from Grandma's kitchen. I was the last to arrive at the table, trying out delay tactics until my mother lost her patience with me. And finally, when we were all seated together, we joined in our table prayer. However, this 6-year-old person was not going to thank God for liver and onions. Grandma whispered, "Suzanne!" So reluctantly, I joined in the prayer. It was obvious to everyone that I did not like this meal. I clanked my silverware. I repeatedly thumped my milk glass down on the table, and I made numerous gagging sounds. I finally made it through the meal, burying my liver and onions in mounds and mounds of mashed potatoes. Later that day, when we were alone, my normally soft-spoken, don't-ruffle-the-waters grandma took me to task, reminding me that whether I liked the food or not, it was all a generous gift from God, and I was, in her words, beholden to our good, loving God to act in a thankful manner. Fortunately, she did not remind me of all the children in the world who would have loved to have just one bite of my liver and onions. And now the funny part of this story, today liver and onions is one of my very favorite foods. Living worshipfully, today's theme, and the beginning of this congregation's month-long emphasis on stewardship, centers on the gospel narration of the 10 lepers healed by Jesus. Perhaps you've never considered this story to be one of stewardship. Perhaps I could change your mind. You recall, Jesus heals all 10, but only one comes back to say thanks to Jesus for the healing. The other 9 are off down the road to find the priest who would, as was their custom, inspect the lepers and verify their cleanliness. Only then could the lepers be readmitted to the temple and so be freed from their status as the outcast unclean. The one who turns back is different. He is different in his very identity. He is doubly outcast. First, he is an untouchable, a leper. And secondly, a despised foreigner of Samaritan descent. And it is he alone who returns, bends and touches his forehead to the ground at the feet of Jesus in sincere thankfulness for what Jesus has done for him. An act of worship, not wasted on Jesus, who commends him for his faith. Over the years, I have heard innumerable sermons on the 10 lepers, each with different emphasis: faith versus non-faith, the thankful and the unthankful, gratitude or ingratitude, hope or hopeless, and the list goes on. It takes me a long time to write just one sermon, and this one was no different. And as I contemplated what to say to you, it dawned on me for the very first time that this gospel lesson as actually none of the above. All 10 of the lepers had faith. They believed Jesus would heal them. When Jesus told them to go and show themselves to the priest, they went without questioning. Do notice, they were not immediately healed as they stood in front of Jesus. The healing did not take place until they were long on their way to the temple. And when they realized their sores and maimed limbs were healed, they rejoiced in the goodness that had just happened to them. They couldn't wait to begin the new lives that had been denied them for so long as outcast lepers. They couldn't wait to catch up on the latest family news. They couldn't wait for a home-cooked meal. They couldn't wait to get back to their jobs. They just couldn't wait. What was wrong with them that they couldn't wait to resume their lives? Why couldn't they return worshiping Jesus for the gift of new life just given them? Why? What excuses may have passed through their minds? Perhaps they said, I'm waiting to see if this is real and all is better. Or, I've got to make up for lost time, so I'll thank Jesus when I get caught up. Or, I'm so glad this problem is solved that I don't want to think about what I have just been through for a while. Or, Jesus really didn't do anything. I would have gotten better anyway. Or, finally, Jesus knows how grateful I am for what he did for me. Don't they sound just like us? They are us. When God gives us so many blessings, even tiny blessings, we put off what is one of the easiest things to do, worshiping Jesus for what he does for us, day in and day out. So we've dealt with the 9 lepers. Now let's look at the one who came back. He came back in a burst of great emotion, shouting at the top of his lungs, glorifying God. He knew who had healed him, and he knew Jesus was more than a mere man. He doesn't just glorify God. Notice this. He fell on his face at Jesus' feet. He worshiped Jesus. And he knew, what they all knew, the disciples and the onlookers, Samaritan and Jew, that God and God alone was to be worshipped. Not only the leper's words, but his posture, placing his head at Jesus' feet, was an act of worship. Does this 10th leper set an example for us? You bet he does. Pastor Jack Hinton of New Bern, North Carolina, relayed this experience. While on a trip visiting leper colonies on the island of Tobago, he had the opportunity to lead worship. At the end of the service, there was time for yet one more hymn. So he asked if anyone had a request. A woman who had been facing away from the pulpit turned around. It was the most hideous face I had ever seen, Reverend Hinton said. The woman's nose and ears were entirely gone. The disease had destroyed her lips as well. She lifted a fingerless hand in the air and asked, "Can we sing, 'Count Your Many Blessings'?" Overcome with emotion, Pastor Hinton left the service. He was followed by a team member who said, "Jack, I guess you'll never be able to sing that song again." "Oh, yes, I will," Jack replied, "but I'll never sing it in the same way." This kind of thankfulness is worship. The story of the 10 lepers serves as an invitation to us to recognize that what we see makes all the differences, and what we see becomes our worshipful response to God's goodness in our lives. In the face of adversity, do we see danger or opportunity? In the face of human need, do we see demand or gift? In the face of a stranger, do we see potential enemy or friend? When we look to God, do we see stern judge or loving parent? When we look to ourselves, do we see failure or a beloved child? When we look to the future, do we see fearful uncertainty or an open horizon? Well, there is, of course, no right answer to these questions. How we answer depends on what we see. yet how we answer dramatically shapes both our outlook and our behavior. Perhaps this is the key to our stewardship emphasis today. Stewardship is not first about giving, but about seeing all that we have been given and rejoicing in a way that cannot help but shape how we act. Perhaps this is the key to the worship that Pastor Jim plans and we attend week in and week out. Worship is not simply hearing God's story or even praising God in response. Rather, it is offering prayers of thanksgiving and intercession for ourselves, our families, and worldwide communities. It is loudly confessing our sins and receiving forgiveness at the Lord's table. It is taking the good news of our salvation with us into our daily lives. It is all intended to help us see and acknowledge God at work in our lives. Hear this. Worship is our response to God.